Hello class, welcome back. So we are now working on some of our sociological concepts, and we're going to start with the scientific method. So the straightforward definition of what a scientific method is a systematic, organized series of steps that ensures maximum objectivity and consistency in researching a problem. So breaking that down, what does that mean? It means that when doing research, we want to try to be as consistent as possible, as systematic as possible, and as organized as possible. Therefore, we have a very strict set of guidelines or rules that we abide by. And we start with what we call objectivity. Now, we've already talked a little bit about what value-free sociology is. We've mentioned it in terms of some sociologists, founding sociologists who brought us the idea of value-free sociology. And that is essentially that you should start your research, any scientific research, without bias. If you start knowing what you want to find and with the aim of only finding evidence to support your preconceived notions, this is not value-free sociology. This is not good science, and this is very biased kind of science. One of the reasons why people say, if a company, maybe a pharmaceutical company, is going to do research to test whether or not their own medications are safe for the public, there could be a potential issue with bias because they have an interest in this particular medication going out into the public to be sold, and that is an interest of profit, and therefore there's potential to have skewed research that's not value-free and that is biased towards approving that type of medication or that type of food or whatever else is being done. So what we do as social scientists, and the reason why theory is so important is because in deciding what question to ask, so if we start at the bottom here, we're going to kind of work our way back up a little bit. In deciding what question to ask, sociologists are guided very much by the theories. We talked about social conflict theory, structural functional theories, and social interaction theories as the three main paradigms in sociology. And those guide us in terms of the paradigms that we are using or the theories that we're using in order to ask what kind of questions. So if you're being guided by, say, social conflict theory, you could be asking questions like, what type of organizations or institutions play a role, how do organizations play a role in inequality in society? And then we also want to be informed by our theories. So we then make sure we understand the theoretical perspective we come from and use that to inform the way that we shape the question and how we understand it. After doing so and trying to do some critical investigation in what we call a literature review, reviewing the literature of other academics, we would come up with what we call a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is essentially a statement about how something works. It's a statement about the connection between two variables, so two different things. For example, you might say there is a connection between heat and what type of clothing people wear. Since it's so hot out, people might decide to wear less clothing, right? And so those are the two variables, what they wear and the heat outside. And then you would go out and you try to gather data, what we call empirical evidence. And empirical evidence essentially is the observable evidence or facts to support or negate the hypothesis, to be able to essentially test whether or not that hypothesis is accurate or not. So let's move quickly into some additional concepts that you're going to be using throughout this class. And we'll go over these again later on in the semester. We touch upon these, or sometimes I just use the terminology as I'm describing additional concepts. And the first one that we talk about is called meritocracy. Meritocracy is the concept that success of an individual is based on their merit, meaning hard work, intelligence, talent will equate to success. You're basically, if you have a high level of intelligence, talent, and you're hardworking, you therefore should be successful. And that the level of success is equated to that person's actual merit. So their ability to do a good job, their ability to understand because they're intelligent, and the talent and their work ethic. Unfortunately, sociologists have discovered that this is not necessarily how society works. Although merit does play a role in our capability to achieve in our society, essentially meritocracy is a myth. When you look at it from a macro level perspective, so that's one of those terms we just discussed, a large level perspective, there are other factors that play often a much more consequential role in a person's overall success in life or ability to achieve in life. And that's often their socioeconomic status, so their class, like how wealthy they are when they're born, their race, their sex, their gender, their religion, where they live, the time they live in. All these have a great impact on our ability to be successful in our own lives in a way that we deem that we want to be. And therefore, as a whole, in terms of our society being based on merit, we found that essentially that is a myth. That although merit does play some role, we are not a merit-based society. We do not have a meritocracy. Again, we've already talked about value-free, meaning value-free sociology or an unbiased approach and objectivity. And then that brings us to ethnocentrism. So ethnocentrism is this idea that we tend to look at things from our own perspective. So we tend to see the world from our understanding and our experiences. If you come from a wealth privileged background, it may be difficult for you to understand why somebody who comes who's in the same school as you might make the decisions that they make if they come from a lower economic status than you do. So we tend to look at things from our own ideas of how the world works. If we take it down to a very micro level, a good example of this would be we have a certain way in which we like to keep our home. Some of us like to be a little bit messy. Some of us like to be very neat and clean. Some of us don't care what our house looks like. Now, we tend to judge other people's homes and their lifestyle based on our own ideas of how we think a home should be kept. So if you are very neat and clean and organized, you might go into somebody's home who's a little bit more artistic and free-flowing in their way that they keep their home and decide that it's not appropriate or it's too messy or they're not clean enough. On the other hand, if you are the person who is the more free spirit in your home and you don't think that people should have to make their bed every day and you don't believe that a few dishes in the sink are that big of a deal, that there's more important things to concentrate on, you might go into somebody's home who's very tidy and neat and clean and think that they're a neat freak or they have OCD or they're, they push it too far, in other words. So that's kind of a little bit of a touch upon what ethnocentrism is, and we'll go back to that later. But just so that you know, in case we use these terminology again, let's move on to what we call social structures. So social structures are not exactly the same thing as a social organization, but a lot of times it's easy for students, to understand what a social organization is when we talk about, and the organization of government would be the DMV is a government organization. Education, so a college is an organization that is part of the education system, but the DMV is not the government, it's just an organization. The social structure of government includes all the facilities and all the structures and all the organizations and how the government actually works. In terms of education, we have an education system. A school is an organization, but the education system is the social structure. Just in the same way that religion is a social structure, but your church is an organization. It's a part of the religious social structure, but it is not the religious structure itself. So you have to think a little more on the broad level perspective, what we call macro level perspective, and understand that we have these different social structures in our society. Where it sometimes becomes confusing is when we talk about the social structure of family. So when we think about family, we think about our own family and what that means. And that's a very micro level concept or perspective for many of us. But we also have the social structure of family in our society. And in our particular society, in the United States at this time, it's a very patriarchal, heteronormative idea of what is the family. So what do I mean by that? Patriarchal, meaning that the man is the head of the household. Heteronormative, meaning that we assume a family to be a father and a mother as opposed to a father and a father or a mother and a mother. We assume a family to include children. So in our idea, in our minds, we think about the social structure of the family as being this nuclear family. And although our own individual families may not fit into that description or example perfectly, we still understand it and have been taught it in this idea of what the family is. Who qualifies as family and who does not qualify as family. And the social structure of family plays a very important role in how our government works, our education works. It's connected to economics and religion, and it's connected to a whole variety of other aspects of our society and other social structures. So hopefully that helps, and we don't have too many questions on that one. Let's move on to research models. So I think that this is a good place to stop. We'll do another short video, and then we'll do just research models on through the end in this next video lecture. I will see you soon. Go take a little break.